Okay, so it's the thing that happened to my friend Marcus. He's one of the most careful drivers I know. Seatbelt on before the engine starts, never touches his phone, signals every single lane change even when the road is completely empty at 2 in the morning. The kind of guy who actually checks his tire pressure. He got pulled over last spring. Routine stop. Taillight issue he didn't even know about. He was home in 20 minutes, right? Clean record, nothing to hide, cooperative guy. Should have been simple. It wasn't simple. And the reason it wasn't simple had nothing to do with the taillight. It had nothing to do with anything Marcus actually did. It had everything to do with what Marcus said in the first 90 seconds of that stop. Completely innocent things. Things that felt like the right things to say. Things that any reasonable, honest person would say in that exact situation. And that's what this video is actually about. Because I've been thinking about this for a long time now, and the more I look into it, the more it genuinely bothers me that this stuff isn't taught anywhere. Like, we spend 12 years in school, and nobody once sits us down and explains what actually happens during a traffic stop from a legal standpoint. What you're required to do. What you're not required to do. What the words coming out of your mouth actually mean in that context. Nobody teaches this. And then one day you're sitting on the side of the road with your hazards blinking and your hands shaking a little, even though you've done absolutely nothing wrong. And you're making decisions you don't even realize are decisions. Decisions that can matter. Decisions that sometimes matter a lot. That's the thing that keeps me up at night about this, honestly. So let's go back to the moment. You know the one. You're driving. Everything is fine. You're tired maybe, or thinking about dinner, or just kind of on autopilot the way you get on roads you've driven 1,000 times. And then you see those lights. And I don't care who you are or how many times it's happened to you. That feeling hits. That stomach drop, that immediate pulse of, oh no, even when your brain is simultaneously saying, wait, I haven't done anything. Both of those things happening at the exact same second. It's this weird split second of panic and logic running into each other. You pull over, you breathe, and almost immediately your brain goes into what I can only describe as good person mode. You want to seem cooperative. You want to seem like someone who has absolutely nothing to hide. You want this to go smoothly and be over quickly so you can get back to your evening. And so you do the things, all of them. The things everyone does. Window goes all the way down before the officer even gets out of their car. You're already reaching across for your registration. Glove box is open. You're shuffling through papers. You've got the insurance card ready to go. And when the officer walks up and asks if you know why you were stopped, you guess. Was I going a little fast back there? I honestly wasn't sure about the speed limit through that section. Or maybe, did my brake light go out? I've been meaning to check that. Or the classic, I really have no idea. Did I do something wrong? And here's the thing that Marcus didn't know in that moment, that I didn't know for most of my driving life, that the vast majority of drivers don't know. Every single one of those responses is a problem. Not because you said anything untrue, not because your intentions weren't completely honest, but because of what those words actually do in the context of a legal encounter on the side of the road. Let me explain it this way. When you guess at why you were stopped, was I speeding? You've just handed the officer a direction. You pointed at something. Even if that's not why they pulled you over. Even if you weren't speeding at all. You just said the word speeding. You put it in the air. That came from your mouth, not from theirs. This sounds small. It isn't always small. And the document thing, reaching for everything before being asked, that one's got 2 layers to it that most people don't think about. The first is practical. While you're leaning over opening compartments, an officer walking toward your car has a clean view into the interior. Anything they can see from outside, anything in plain sight, is fair game in terms of what they're observing and noting. The second layer is subtler. When you hand things over before being asked, you're setting a tone for the interaction, a pattern. You're establishing yourself as someone who gives things to this person without prompting, without being asked. And that pattern, it can extend. It can carry into moments later in the stop that matter a lot more than your registration card. Now look, I'm not saying any of this makes the officers who do their jobs properly into bad guys. That's not what this is. Most traffic stops are handled professionally by officers who are just doing their work. This isn't about them. This is about you, and specifically about the fact that most people, including genuinely careful, law-abiding, smart people, walk into these encounters without knowing something really fundamental. They don't know what they're actually required to do. And that gap between what you're legally required to do and what your instincts tell you to do, that's where things go sideways. So let's actually talk about it. What does the law genuinely require from you during a routine traffic stop? You have to provide your driver's license when asked, your vehicle registration when asked, your proof of insurance when asked. In certain states, the ones with what are called stop and identify laws, you may need to give your name if you've been lawfully detained, and you cannot physically obstruct the officer from doing their job. That's it. That's the actual list. You are generally not required to tell them where you're going, not required to explain where you came from, not required to account for who you were with, or what you were doing, or why you were in a particular neighborhood, or what's in the back seat, or whether you've had anything to drink in the last 6 hours. All of those things feel required. The situation creates this enormous, invisible pressure to answer everything, explain everything, account for everything. But that pressure is social. It's not legal. And there's a difference. A really important difference. Here's the part that I think matters most, and this one took me a while to fully sit with. Having nothing to hide doesn't mean you have no right to privacy. Those are two completely different statements that people treat as if they mean the same thing. They don't. Your right to not answer certain questions, your right to decline a search, your right to stay quiet. None of these things exist only for people who've done something wrong. They exist for everyone, because even innocent people say things that get misremembered. Even innocent people have items in their car they forgot about. Even innocent people give explanations that sound different under pressure than they did in their head. The protection isn't there because the legal system assumes you're guilty. It's there because the legal system recognizes that people make mistakes, that words get twisted, that moments of pressure produce imperfect communication. Understanding that isn't cynical, it's just accurate. Okay, so now we get to the part of the stop where things can really shift, the search question. Mind if I take a look around real quick? Or I'm just going to check the trunk, it'll only take a second. Or the one that's hardest to say no to. You've got nothing to hide, right? So this shouldn't be a problem. That last one is doing something really specific. It's taking your legal right to decline a search and reframing it as suspicious behavior. Like if you have that right and choose to use it, something must be wrong. But think about that for a second. The whole point of the right is that it applies regardless of whether you have something to hide. That's what makes it a right and not just a courtesy for guilty people. When any version of this question comes at you, and it might be casual, it might be assumptive, it might sound like they've already decided and are just telling you, the response is this: Officer, I don't consent to searches. That's it. 5 words. Not, I'd rather you didn't. That's vague enough to be questioned. Not, I mean, I have nothing to hide, but that sentence never ends anywhere good. Not, can't you just take my word for it? That keeps the conversation alive in a way that doesn't help you. 5 words. Calm voice. Not a performance of confidence, just flat, neutral, clear. You don't owe an explanation. You don't owe a justification. You don't owe an apology. Now here's something that I think about a lot because it's the version of this that gets people who think they're paying attention. The stop feels like it's winding down. The documents have been checked. The ticket or warning has been dealt with. The energy is lighter. The officer is leaning against your car being friendly, asking about your evening, where you're headed, whether you work around here. It feels like small talk. It honestly feels like the worst part is over, and now you're just in the friendly cool-down phase of the whole thing. But here's what's actually happening legally in that moment. The purpose of the stop is done, and continuing to hold you there, keeping the encounter going, requires either a new legal justification or your own voluntary participation in continuing the conversation. If you keep chatting, if you keep answering those friendly questions about your evening and your job and where you're headed, courts can view that as you choosing to continue the interaction yourself. You're not being detained, you're apparently just talking, and you might be, but you might also be slowly painting a picture you didn't mean to paint. In that moment, that seemingly harmless, wind-down, friendly moment, you can ask the 4 words that most people never think to ask. Am I free to go? That's it. Politely, genuinely, like someone who has places to be and isn't trying to be difficult. That question requires a real answer. If yes, you're free. You say thanks and you leave. If no, you're being detained. And that requires justification. And you follow up with, then I'd like to remain silent until I can speak with an attorney. 4 words that most people never say, because most people don't know they can. Let me give you the whole toolkit right now. These are the phrases that matter. Practice them. Say them out loud. Right now if you want, no one's watching. Because the version of you that freezes and fumbles when the moment comes is the version that never practiced. The version that says the right thing calmly and clearly is the version that heard these 100 times before they needed them. First, when asked if you know why you were stopped, no, officer, I don't. Not a guess, not a suggestion, just that. Second, when questions go past the documents, I'd rather not answer questions without an attorney present. Third, when the consent question comes in any form, officer, I don't consent to searches. Fourth, if they're searching anyway and you need it on record, I don't consent to this search, but I won't physically resist. Fifth, when the stop seems to be extending without reason, am I being detained or am I free to go? Sixth, if you're being detained, I'm going to remain silent until I can speak with an attorney. 6 phrases, that's the whole thing. You don't need a law degree to use them. You just need to know they exist and practice saying them until they feel normal in your mouth. All right, let's run through some of the situations where people get tripped up because the standard traffic stop setup doesn't quite apply. What if you're a passenger? This one surprises people. If you're not driving, you might feel like the whole thing has nothing to do with you. You're just there. That's not really how it works. Courts have established that passengers are considered part of the stop. you can be ordered out of the vehicle. In stop and identify states, you may need to provide your name. And if a search happens, what's near you, what belongs to you, what you might know about, all of that is on the table. So as a passenger, the same basic approach applies. Hands visible. Don't volunteer anything. Don't try to help by narrating what you were doing that night. Don't explain on behalf of the driver. You're not making anything better by filling the air with explanations nobody asked for. Calm, still, cooperative where legally required, quiet everywhere else. What about your phone? The Supreme Court, unanimously, which almost never happens, ruled that police generally need a warrant to go through the contents of your cell phone. That's a clear, strong protection. So if an officer asks to see your phone, maybe you were pulled over for distracted driving, maybe they want to check something specific, you can say, "I don't consent to a search of my phone." Don't hand it over. Don't start scrolling through it to show them something you think proves your point. If they insist they have authority, you state clearly, "I want it on record that I'm not consenting to this." And then you let the legal process figure out what comes next. That process exists for exactly this kind of situation. Use it. What about a canine unit showing up? So this is a significant moment, and it's designed to feel significant. The pressure is deliberate. The legal reality. A trained dog sniffing around the outside of your car during a lawful stop generally doesn't require your consent. Courts have ruled on this. But here's what does matter. The stop can't be extended specifically to wait for that dog to arrive without additional justification. If your traffic stop has effectively concluded, and now you're being asked to just hang around while a canine drives across town, that extension of the stop is something a lawyer can potentially challenge. So in that moment, stay calm. State that you don't consent to any searches. Don't escalate anything, and pay close, careful attention to the sequence of events. What happened, in what order, at what time. Write all of it down the minute you're somewhere safe. Details have value, especially when they're written down while they're fresh. What if you're at home and it's a knock at the door instead of a traffic stop? Different setting, same carefulness required. Your home is where your legal protections are strongest. An officer without a warrant does not have the right to enter. You can talk through a partially open door and ask, "Do you have a warrant?" If they have one, they're required to show it. If they don't, you can say, calmly, no drama, "I'm not able to invite you in without a warrant." What I see happen constantly is people open the door wide, step back, wave them in out of pure instinct. And courts have recognized that behavior as potentially implying consent to enter. Opening wide, stepping aside, that can be treated as an invitation. You don't have to do that for a routine inquiry. Knowing that is valuable. And the last scenario I want to cover, because it's the one that creates the most fear and honestly deserves direct acknowledgement. What if the situation escalates in a way you didn't expect? What if something feels off? What if the energy shifts fast? I'll say this plainly. If a stop feels dangerous, if something is happening that you did not anticipate and the situation feels genuinely unsafe, your physical safety is the only thing that matters in that moment. Not making a legal point, not asserting a right loudly, not winning the exchange. Safety first, full stop. Without exception. Lower your voice, slow your movements, narrate everything you're doing, keep your hands visible, be the calmest person in the car, not as a tactic, but because it genuinely reduces the chance of something terrible happening. And if something went wrong legally, comply in the moment, stay calm, and the second you are somewhere safe, write everything down. Times, what was said, what happened in what order, badge numbers if you saw them, every detail while it's still clear. That information, in the hands of the right attorney, has real power. The roadside is not the arena for that fight. A proper legal process is. Okay, I want to bring this home because I've been rambling long enough and I know you've got things to do. Here's what I actually want you to take from this. Rights don't protect people who don't know they have them. That's not a dramatic thing to say. It's just a factual thing to say. The law doesn't automatically shield you from the consequences of things you consented to or statements you made voluntarily. You have to know what you're consenting to. You have to know what questions you don't have to answer. And the gap between the driver who walks away clean and the driver who doesn't, it's almost never about guilt or innocence. It's about information, about knowing the phrases, about having practiced them enough that they come out calm and natural when your hands are shaking a little and there's someone standing right outside your window. The drivers who handle these encounters well aren't lawyers. They're not special. They're just people who knew a few things before they needed to know them. That's you now. Go practice those 6 phrases before you go to sleep tonight. Say them out loud like you mean them. Say them until they're boring. The day they're boring is the day you're ready. And then go be that driver. Next video, we're getting into something that I think is genuinely underrated in terms of how much people need to know it. What to actually do in the 24 hours after a traffic stop that went wrong or felt wrong. The steps. The specific steps in order. Because most people know they should talk to a lawyer, and that's about where their plan ends. We can do better than that. See you there.